Okay, so welcome to the session. First, I want to thank you for the flexibility in attending this a week later than I had originally anticipated. Unfortunately, owing to getting COVID and being very sick, I was not able to do that last week. So we are now going ahead with the session today. So thank you for your flexibility. Let's go ahead and dive right into our session, Augmented Reality for Early Learners. So I want to take a minute, just go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. It's a great way for us to get to know who's attending these sessions for the regional training centers, but also for you to get to network with anyone that might be in your area. Just give us your name, let us know where you're joining from and what ages that you're working with. I'll give you about 30 seconds or so to go ahead and do that in the chat. Lovely. So my name is Lindsay Stuttard. I'm a digital teaching and learning specialist for ACS International Schools based out of the UK. I'm also an Apple Distinguished Educator, and I'm a very active member of the Apple community on Twitter. So you can follow me at LindsDive85. I do tend to put a lot of the work that I do with augmented reality up on my Twitter feed, so that's always a good place to go if you're interested in finding out the new things that I'm working on with our schools. I'm also one of the managers for the ACS International Regional Training Center with Apple. We're relatively new. We only just got authorized over the summer of last year, but you can follow us on Twitter at ACSRTC. If you're interested in learning more about our school or our approach, there is our website, acs-schools.com. And if you want to contact myself or any of the other managers for the ACSRTC, we have our email address, acsinternationalrtc@gmail.com. If there is anything that you're interested in sharing about, something that you're really connecting with during the session, please feel free to tweet. I always love seeing what people have as key takeaways from the sessions. Today, we're going to be talking about a few different things. The main focus is going to be really on helping you to understand about augmented reality and how to go about having that purposeful use in your classrooms or supporting your staff in their using it in their classrooms. Then I'm going to go through how we went about getting started and the things that we put in place with AR in our early childhood at ACS, as well as some recommended resources that we've been working with and piloting for the last few years and are recommending others to get started with. And then we'll take a look at how we can get our students to transition to using augmented reality to support their education when they move out of early childhood or out of early years programs and into the elementary or primary ages. And then in our next steps on your journey to using AR more purposefully, I've got some additional resources and guidance for you towards the end of the session. So I'm hoping to bring this in just under about 50 minutes for the session, leaving it open for any questions towards the end. But go ahead and pop anything you want to in the chat if you've got any questions or comments. I'll try and keep an eye on that as we go through the session today. So the most important part is really having a good understanding about AR, especially when it ties into the use of it in education. And the way I define it is the use of augmented reality is the ability to make changes to and interact with our real world through the digital. So it's getting our students to not only make sense of their world and understanding what it is around them, but also getting them to interact with their real world, but through a digital platform, and seeing how they can start to make changes to the real world through the use of their devices like an iPad. Now, we are a one-to-one school, and we do have one-to-one iPads for our students, starting around our 3 to 4, 4 to 5-year-olds, that they get to have a one-to-one iPad. I want to be very clear that AR is not VR. It's very, very different things. And it's important to understand that AR is not immersive on the senses like VR. Children are much more aware that what they see is not real, what they're seeing as the digital aspect being layered into the real world. They're very aware that that's not what they're really seeing. Whereas VR, especially with young children, it's not something that I support. I don't think there's enough evidence or research to show that there are more impactful benefits rather than there being any hindrances. I think with young children, they're still making sense of the world around them at the age that they are, and it can be quite confusing or detrimental to them to place them in essentially an alternative reality where they're not really aware that what they're seeing is not necessarily real. And that is why I'm a big advocate for the use of AR, because it's forcing children to go through and explore through a device, and they can be very aware that what they're seeing then is essentially just this alternative digital reality, but they can clearly see by moving their device that what they're seeing is not what's really there and around them. Augmented reality definitely offers our young learners the ability to step into places that were previously unattainable. And the reason I look at it like this is for two specific reasons. One is that owing to COVID and students having to learn from home or having to do some form of hybrid education and not being able to go to different places, AR is allowing us to bring access to learning directly to the students through the use of the devices. So if we want to explain about a great exhibit that we can't necessarily go and see, there might be ways that we can bring elements of that into the classroom and have those exhibits there for the students to interact with. But also, I think it's now providing access to places that we just wouldn't normally be able to access anyway. So being able to go and walk on the surface of the moon and be inside a rocket ship and learn more about the moon landing or what it is that our astronauts are doing, or even doing a deep sea dive and going down to a coral reef and exploring the different life that lives there. These are not things that we would normally be able to access anyway, but now we can provide an alternative means of seeing that type of content through the use of augmented reality. And I think that can be really powerful, especially for our young learners. AR is, again, as I mentioned before, it's easily able to help young children distinguish between the real world and the digital, in particular because they use devices to be able to view this content. So they can safely put it down, walk away from it, and they're not still immersed in that alternative world. And so we can easily teach about the digital world versus the real world through the use of AR. Now, while I was preparing for this workshop, I was doing a bit of research and I was quite struck by this quote. In the year 2022, there will be an estimated 1.1 billion mobile AR users worldwide. And I was struck by that for a few different reasons. I've spoken about AR over the last 2 years at several different conferences and in workshops. And one of the quotes that I remember from 2020 was that 75% of consumers were now expecting companies to provide an AR experience. And this was owing to the effects of the pandemic, where consumers couldn't go to stores, they couldn't interact with different content, they couldn't explore what was in the shops, and consumers had to find a way of gaining access to products right in their home. And so this then shifted to product companies providing access to their products to these consumers through the use of AR. And what we see now, based on information like this, is that AR is not going away. In fact, it's actually exploding, with different industries now tapping into the use of AR, providing access to their consumers and their clients. But it also means it's going to be an uptick in industry jobs. So I was really quite struck by this. And if you think about the young children that you work with, how many of them might have access to a mobile phone at home, whether it's their own or whether it's their parents. And if they have access to things like Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, you've got those types of filters on there that allow them to interact with augmented reality. So it's not going away. In fact, it's becoming more prevalent in our society. And so we as educators need to be aware about this type of technology, but how we can leverage it for the use of education in the classroom. So I want to take a look now at the purposeful use of augmented reality. It's something that I've spoken about. If you've heard me speak before, I always come back to that purposeful use. And I want you to consider the following: is really think about when you're going to use AR in the classroom, is move beyond just what is the wow factor. Yes, this technology is amazing and it's fantastic as an engagement tool for our students. But if that's all you're using it for, then it doesn't really have that purposeful use. So really think about moving beyond just what the wow factor is. And I always get my teachers that I work with to consider a few things when they're going to be bringing augmented reality into the classroom. The first is thinking about, what is it that I do want my students to know? So if I'm going to be using AR, what is the purpose of it? What is that AR going to be providing access to? And what at the end of that AR experience do I want my students to know? Will that experience help my students to connect with that content and create meaning and understanding? The second is thinking about, will this enhance their understanding and access to the content? Think about the technology blockades that can come up anytime you're using technology in the classroom. And is this going to be something that enhances their experience and their education, or is it going to be a hindrance? Think about if you're going to be able to troubleshoot things if something doesn't go according to plan. How much setup is going to be needed ahead of time? So just really be aware of those factors. Again, versus just bringing it in because of that wow factor. Is it providing more access to the content and therefore the understanding for the students? I put in there they, meaning the students, but actually I think it's both teacher and students. It's what do we need to know before using AR? It might be worthwhile thinking about how a particular app or program is going to work, what the interface looks like, and what tools are going to be involved with using that. And maybe it's the opportunity to let students play first before they then go ahead and use it to connect to the content. Get them familiar with the interface, get them used to understanding what it means to learn through augmented reality, layering essentially digital content into their real world. So what do you need to know ahead of time? And then the last thing is really tapping into that SAMA model of substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. Is the use of AR providing something that other methods and approaches can't? So for example, if you want to go and do a deep sea dive and get your students to be inside a coral reef and really having that first person perspective looking around, is that providing something that another method, say watching a video or reading a book, just isn't providing? So really being able to critically evaluate the use of the AR purposefully as well. So now that we've sort of had a little look at understanding AR and then the purposeful use of it, I want to talk about how we went about getting started and how I think you can be on the right path to using augmented reality purposely with your students. So we spent the last 2 years really evaluating the different tools that were available, not only that matched up with the type of devices that we have access to, but also that would support the content and the curriculum that we had to teach to our students. And through this evaluation process, we've come up with essentially our own AR curriculum that looks at native tools on the iPad specifically, and then supporting apps that correlate with how we want to teach our students going forwards. And so this then has developed into a series of lessons that we start with our young learners that we can then branch off of. So it's taken 2 years of ongoing trial and testing to develop this type of resource, but it focuses on building up digital skills for students. So tapping into understanding about photography skills, videography skills, drawing skills, all that tie into how we can start purposely using augmented reality. As I mentioned, we definitely make use of a lot of the native apps and tools that are on the iPad, as well as a selection of core apps that are AR specific to support the content that we deliver in the classroom. And in this type of curriculum, we have 3 areas of lesson progression, where it's all about teaching our students how they can make simple changes to their existing world through the iPad, how they can use AR to discover their world, and then how they can go about starting to use AR to create in their world. And this then ties into our Everyone Can Create integrated curriculum, specifically looking at the innovative technology area. So we include AR as sort of one of our focuses throughout the year and throughout the schooling for our early childhood students all the way up into our primary, and then going beyond into our middle school. But we also then tie that into 3D printing and graphic design. So this resource has taken a couple of years to develop, and we're hoping to really get it fully implemented starting in the next academic year. So that ties into the resources from Apple, but also is aligned with the ISTE standards that we implement as evaluating our students and their use of technology. Now, one of the very essential tools that we make use of is the camera. We spend a lot of time teaching our students about the camera, the front-facing camera, the rear camera on the iPad, because it is essential that they know about this tool as it facilitates the use of AR in the classroom. And so the camera helps you to have those connections between the real world and the digital, and helps our students to see what is real and what is not. Without the camera, you're not able to do AR and bring it to life in your classroom. But on the flip side, we also take things from the real world and we augment them back into being digital. And we utilize the camera for that process as well. And in teaching about the camera, we work with our students so that they can have a purposeful understanding about making alterations to photographs that they take of their world through editing, through markup, through filters, as a way of demonstrating the ability of our students to make changes to their world. And we start at this ground level with them, and we build up to bringing in augmented reality apps specifically for their use. We also spend time working with our students to teach them about how to use screen recording on the iPad. It's a step up from using the camera just to take video, because now we're going to be recording what the students are seeing on their device. And it's allowing our students to have their voice, to be able to explain what it is that they are seeing and experiencing in their own words. And screen recording is a really powerful tool when you're using some AR applications, some of which have their own built-in screen recording or screenshot capabilities, and some that do not. So we definitely teach our students how to take screen recordings even in the early years, so that they can explain and talk about what it is they're experiencing. That evidence then gets shared to our families through our program of Seesaw. One of the more recent additions to this idea of teaching about augmented reality is making use of Keynote Live. Now, this was introduced to me by a wonderful Apple Distinguished educator, Paul Hamilton, where he was teaching us about using Keynote Live, and I saw it as being that transition from using the camera to document our world to then layering digital content that the students create right into the real world as well. And essentially, if you've never used it before, Keynote Live allows you to open a new Keynote presentation on your iPad and click the plus button and add in essentially a live video feed. And we've made use of that live video feed with the iPads, and the students are then layering their own creations right on top of it. So it's a way for them to easily bring what they've created digitally and place it in the real world. And this is a great stepping stool from just using the camera up to Keynote Live, and then progressing into bringing more digital content into the classroom or into their environment using augmented reality applications. So Keynote Live is a wonderful one to check out, and we've built it into our curriculum as well. We also, even with our students that don't have one-to-one iPads, maybe have shared iPads or don't have access to them all the time in the classroom, we've used Keynote Live in a different way through provocations and through digital play in the classroom, where we will set something up and allow the students to then interact with the content that they are seeing. Now, in this example, we've made use of a projector with a screen that is being projected, this image of a house that you're seeing, onto a backdrop. And then in front of it, we have the laptop connected to the Apple TV and screen that is projecting an animation using Keynote Live. And as you can see in the video, that animation will just play on a loop over and over again. You can hear our students in the background. They were very excited about seeing this. And they essentially are sitting in the middle there. So they're seeing themselves on the screen, and they're seeing that digital content around them, and they can go about interacting, asking questions, using it as a provocation to spark the imagination and get them thinking deeper. So this was another way that we brought augmented reality even to our 2 to 3-year-olds as well in this way. It's really key as well to have an understanding about what types of files that you're using when it comes to working with augmented reality. And in this case, we've used a lot of what are called USDZ files. And what we've done is, even if you're not going to have students work one-to-one with augmented reality in the classroom through iPads, or maybe you're limited with access to these tools, we found that by connecting just one iPad to a screen that students can then see, we can then bring models right into the classroom and use those models as provocations or connections to the content, the curriculum that's being covered in the classroom. And it's also a great way for some of my teachers to bring their own models in that they've created when they've done lessons with me about 3D design or 3D model creations. They'll bring what they've made as a 3D piece of content directly into the classroom as well. And because we use USDZ files so much, we've spent the last year cultivating all of these into an AR library of sorts. It's all curated content that has been checked by the digital teachers in the school and myself, and then organized into folders relating to the different categories they fit into. And this was to provide easy access for our teachers to have USDZ files ready to go that related to the different curriculum that they would be covering with their students. So say, for example, we're having this discussion about the human body, you were talking about the heart, you'd really like a model to be able to demonstrate what that would look like. You could go straight into our library, go into the human body folder and use one of those models in there of the heart, or even share it out to the students and they can have their own copy of that model directly on their iPads. And we've utilized the emojis to make it much more visual and fun. We give access to the students to these files, but also we make use of tags. So anything that's brought into these folders are going to be tagged with the tag AR, so we can always come back and find them very easily. So shifting gear now and looking at some of the recommended resources that we've been working with the past 2 years. We definitely make use of the WWF Forest application. This one is essentially a collection of 6 different chapters that students can interact with on their iPads. And every chapter that they go into brings up a forest scene, and there'll be animations that will occur as the students explore and interact with the content on the screen. And essentially they keep exploring and they keep playing. And at the end, when they get to chapter 6, they do get the opportunity to then apply what they've learned about nature and about human impact and about sustainability. And they can then create and build their own forest right in the iPad in the classroom. With it being 6 chapters, we were able to structure it out over a 6-week unit that related to what we were talking about in the classroom, about our responsibility to our environment and what human impact has an effect on in terms of nature. So this one was a wonderful app. We've used it for about 1.5 years now. We'll be using it again in the springtime, following on from our recycling unit. But in addition to students having access to this, we also have them come back together at the end of the lesson after they've completed one of the chapters and really talk about and reflect what it is that they've seen, what were their key takeaways, what did they connect with, and we document all of that evidence at the end of the lesson as a reflection. And combining that with the chapter 6, where they can create their own forest, with screen recording, students can then build their forest, take a screen recording of their design, and then explain it to us as the audience of what it is that we're looking at, why they put certain things in their forest. Very Hungry Caterpillar, another really popular app, but it's a great one to introduce just what the concept of AR is to very young students. And again, this can be done independently on a one-to-one basis, or it can be done sort of whole group where you've got one iPad and you're really exploring and you get the kids to come up and touch the content and interact with it. I think just about everyone has an Eric Carle book in their classroom, so you could definitely use this to relate to an author study, talk about the design, talk about the different characters, feed the caterpillar, help them to turn into a butterfly. And it's a really very simple interface as well. As you can see, there's not a lot of tools, there's not a lot of places that a student could get steered wrong, and it's very colorful and enjoyable for the students. Another wonderful application that I recently got turned on to, again by the wonderful Paul Hamilton, was this app called Rakugaki AR. And this is the only app I'm going to recommend today that actually has a cost to it. All the other ones are going to be free, but the cost is quite minimal. I think we ended up paying about 36 pence per license for our students. And this is a great one to help bring student artwork to life. So if you have concerns about students constantly being on the iPads or being on a screen, this is one that combines what they create in the real world with the digital. And it's great for doing different things like storytelling, connections, and so on. So essentially you scan what the students have drawn and it pops up almost like a little cardboard cutout. And there are different tools and different features that you can use to interact with what you're seeing there. And I will actually show you an example of what one of our kindergarten teachers did with this application later on. Another popular one, AR Maker, and yes, we do start to introduce this to our students around about the pre-K kindergarten age, because it is just such an intuitive app. The more that they go in and play around with it, explore with it, the more they learn about what's possible. In this example, it was using different photographs of different textures and wrapping them around cubes, and then what could you build with those cubes? Very similar to the idea of creating a Minecraft world. And it has great abilities for art and storytelling connections. But AR Maker is so versatile in terms of how open it is that you can really take it in any direction. You can bring in your own 2D content, you can design in the application and make 3D content, and it's great for explaining ideas and thoughts or different concepts that relate to the subject that you're covering. So in this example, it was demonstrating the life cycle of a star, all with hand-drawn images and photographs of the galaxy brought in. One that I don't think most people think about in terms of an official AR application is this one called PlayDoh Touch. Because essentially what this does is it works in the reverse. You're bringing your content that you make in the real world and you're bringing it into the iPad and having it as a digital resource. And so we use this application with our pre-K children relating to their unit, all about understanding about imagination and really making connections to what design thinking is. Now, we spent about 6 weeks with this project where students were doing a lot of the work during the weeks and leading up to using the PlayDoh Touch app on the iPad towards the end. But I'll show you how our project progressed, and hopefully it will give you, a little bit of spark of something that you want to have a go with. So the whole purpose of this unit was to, at the end, for students to have a better understanding of what imagination is and how we think about different storytelling elements such as characters. And in this example, the students decided they wanted to make monsters, but it then led to conversations about, well, everyone thinks about monsters differently. And so using the design thinking process, the students thought about what makes up a monster, broke it down into different elements, which was some of our decomposition work. Then drawing their design, making it out of Play-Doh, and then bringing it to life with the PlayDoh Touch application, which is a free app. It's definitely a great one to use for the students. And it was allowing them to not only scan their own monster that they had created and bring it into their world, but then to scan other monsters that were made by their peers. So overall, a really wonderful unit, and it definitely helped cement the idea of what we were trying to get across, which was understanding about imagination, creating an idea and then bringing it to life. Another app that we have recently introduced this past year is one called Jigspace. I know previously we've used 2 of Jigspace's applications. They've now combined them together into one. And the wonderful thing with this is you can definitely make use of their free models to support the curriculum that you're covering in the classroom. In particular, we do a lot of oceans units in our school. And so using Jigspace's coral reef is a wonderful way to put students in the coral reef and let them walk around and explore, see the fish, look at the colors, ask questions. Maybe it sparks some curiosity where we want to go essentially deeper and learn more about coral reefs or human impact on coral reefs. So this is a wonderful one as well. Again, the interface is very simple. Students can use the arrows on the right-hand side to navigate through different changes to the scene, or they can screen record and talk about what it is that they're seeing. So we introduced this early on, and we do carry on with it throughout the rest of the schooling. Now we're coming to my all-time favorite AR application, Reality Composer. I included this because this is one that I've taught my teachers about how to use to bring certain moments to life for the students. So it's not one that I would say early childhood children should be using themselves, but it's one that teachers can use to help have a bit more of an elaborate provocation in the classroom. So I have this example, which is relating to our Polar Express celebration, which we do round about the holidays as an author study, and we look at the Polar Express book. And what we decided to do was bring the Polar Express right to our school. I stood outside with my iPad, connected it to the screen inside where all the children were, and brought our Polar Express right into the courtyard. We've got the voice in there talking about coming on board the Polar Express train, and it really engaged the children and got them very excited during our Polar Express celebration that we were having. So there's definite possibilities working with Reality Composer for literature connections. Another example is being able to essentially work with Reality Composer to build a scene. In this example, it was math connections that we were looking at, where a pumpkin patch was designed and the students had to go around this digital environment, either in the classroom or outside the classroom with their iPad, interacting with the content and then looking at the different math problems that were being asked of them. So this was a fun one to engage, probably I think it was our pre-K to K ages of students, and definitely one that we could develop more so going into the primary ages. But again, all teacher created as well. There is an additional resource that I want to highlight. It's one that my school chose to invest in. It's one that was quite costly, but it's definitely been a benefit to our early childhood program, and that is our interactive sandbox, or iSandbox. Now, what this is essentially just looks like a regular sandbox, but has a projector and a computer and a sensor connected to it. And so as you move and interact with the sand in the box, the image that's being projected down is then changing depending on what you do. And I think there are about 25 different programs that we can run on this sandbox that the children can then come into the room and interact with. And it has a lot of content that is normally what would be taught in the early childhood ages anyway. And it's one that we decided to invest in because we wanted to show that learning with technology in the early years does not always have to be about screens, and that we can provide access to technology and allow our students to learn with this type of technology in different ways that was not just screen related. And it is one of our most popular tools that we utilize at the school. Now, I mentioned about the Rakugaki application, and now that I've shown the sandbox, I can sort of elaborate a little bit more. I have this kindergarten teacher who is a wonderful lady, but she's not too confident with technology. And she was shown the Rakugaki app by one of my fellow teachers at school, and was just really inspired and said, you know what, we've got this ocean unit, we're looking at the animals and their habitats. I really want to find a great way of demonstrating about sea turtles and how sea turtles lay their eggs and what happens when those eggs hatch. So she came down to the sandbox, she built this wonderful model using the sand, projected sort of a landscape feature onto the sandbox, put a whole bunch of ping pong balls in there, and then used Rakugaki to scan her little sea turtle model that she had, so that she was able to then demonstrate to the students who were watching this on the iPad through the screen how the turtles are then moving around, how they would get out of their shells and hopefully try and make their way through instinct back to the water. But again, this is a teacher who's not terribly confident with technology, and she just saw this purposeful connection. This technology is going to help me demonstrate this concept to the students and their resources that we have access to right away. Thinking now about transitioning to elementary or primary ages. The progression of AR use that we've developed and looked at is really starting first with play and getting the students to understand what AR is, understanding about making digital content, layering it into the real world through things like Keynote Live, being able to make changes to our world through editing and photographs and so on, and really getting them to just become comfortable with the terminology, with the vocabulary, with the types of tools available. And then starting to use the AR to explore. So using the tools like Jigspace to become more familiar and more aware of what the world is like and how we can start to interact with our world in a safe way. And then that progresses when we go into sort of kindergarten and on up in the school, so we start to use augmented reality to create. And if we think about empowering our students to have student voice, we've broken it down into essentially 6 creative tools that are available to students through the iPad. And just like we would have students express their understanding, share their understanding through tools such as music, photography, drawing, videography, and now coding, we now see augmented reality as being included in that collective toolbox for students to be able to share their understanding in their own way, in a manner that makes sense to them. One of the ways that we've seen this work with the primary ages is by doing a focus group on AR Playground. And this was actually something I did during our second lockdown here in the UK, where I never actually met my students face to face. Everything was done through Zoom. And we met once a week, and we developed a way of doing digital storytelling, utilizing the tools of Keynote on the iPad to design our creations and then bring them to life with AR Maker. So each week we come back in Zoom, the students would be working on their Keynote file, and that led up to us then bringing our content directly into AR Maker and doing a screen recording video to tell a story, of which I have a very simple example. So you can start to bring simple animations in as well. So a very, very simple way of introducing digital storytelling with several different elements for our primary students. We also make use of the tool Tinkercad around about the time that they get into primary ages, where the students can use 3D modeling to bring to life different concepts that they're studying in the classroom. In this example, it's looking at sustainability practices and human impact on our oceans, in particular coral reefs. And so the students would use those tools to design a 3D model and then bring it right to life in the classroom, and use screen recording to then explain about what it is that is occurring in that type of model. You might have seen recently, we've moved on up into bringing in LiDAR scanning with some types of our technology. And in this case, it was creating a 3D model utilizing LiDAR scanning capabilities of the sandbox. And our students went to the sandbox, created a model of landforms. We scanned it, made a 3D model of what they had created. And then the students could add more to that model through animations and behaviors, layering their voice in there to explain what it is that they had created. And this type of technology then means that we can move beyond just these one-time experiences. So if we didn't have LiDAR technology, we'd have to do just the modeling in the sandbox, maybe take a picture or a video. move it on and let the next group come in. With this type of technology, we've been able to take those 3D scans of what the students made in the AR sandbox and carry on the learning back in the classroom. And as we progress even further up the school, we've got teachers who then start to design their own AR experiences, layering in different content that relates to the curriculum that they're talking about in the classroom. In our 5th grade class, we have a social studies teacher who does some wonderful augmented reality with our students and essentially gamifies the curriculum, allows them to walk through these models that are designed to hide content and tasks inside, and the students have to go off and explore and play. And not only is it very engaging and interactive, the students can go back into this as many times as they want to, and they can, there's no time limit, there's no logging in and keeping track of passwords and so on. But it also allows them the opportunity to apply their knowledge in a very fun way. It gets them learning outdoors and staying active, which we want. And if we have a student that's isolating or learning from home, this can be shared directly to them as well, so they're not missing out. So our final thoughts now, coming to the next steps on your journey with augmented reality. I definitely advise you to give yourself time to play. If anything, as a takeaway from today's session, try using some of these applications that I've recommended yourselves and really just get to grips with them. Explore the tools, look at the interface, start to think about those connections of how it could relate to supporting your curriculum in the classroom. Definitely don't be afraid of the unknown. I don't think there are many schools that are really integrating augmented reality in the way that we are, and this is all new territory. So don't be afraid of the unknown, and definitely just reach out if you have questions, because everyone is still learning the capabilities and really seeing how we can push the boundaries with this type of technology. And always keep at the back of your mind to make those purposeful connections. Again, move beyond just the wow factor of what AR is providing and think about the ways that you can connect it to what you're asking your student to learn about in the classroom. I want to highlight again what those native tools were that we have spent time teaching our students about in early years. Even if they choose not to use AR going forwards in their primary schooling as a tool, these skills are really important for them no matter what. So we teach them about the camera and all the features and capabilities the camera has to offer. We look at the photo booth application for making changes to our world. And then the Keynote application as well is a very popular one. We teach drawing skills, we teach videography skills through there and make use of Keynote Live. And finally, the screen recording feature as well. To recap, these are the different applications I discussed today. So there is the World Wildlife Federation's Forest app. There is another one as well called Rivers, but we haven't gone about implementing that one as of yet to our curriculum. AR Maker, Jigspace, PlayDoh Touch, My Very Hungry Caterpillar, and Reality Composer. Those are the 6 free ones that I discussed. And then the Rakugaki AR application, which again has a very low cost if you're purchasing it through the VPP program. I want to reiterate as well that through the use of AR, we are teaching a lot of different skills to our students. So we're teaching them a lot of photography terminology and those photography skills. We're teaching them about being an artist and being a creator and how to do drawing. We're teaching them how to use their iPad to take videos through screen recording and document what they're seeing. But we're also then supporting the language development. So we're encouraging them to speak and do that viewing and presenting of what it is that they're seeing and thinking about consciously their audience, who's going to see what my explanation is through this video. If you'd like a bit more support on my YouTube channel, Innovate to Educate, I do have several videos talking about the use of AR Maker specifically, one all about mastering the app, one about using their built-in drawing tools, and the third to look at Memoji storytelling, one of the Apple AR activities that premiered last year. So those videos are available. I'll pop all of these links in the chat at the end so that you have access to all this towards the end of the session. I want to take a minute to talk about this wonderful initiative I've been part of for last year, Create for a Cause. And the reason I'm highlighting it is if you're looking for purposeful connections to different content areas, say that you're getting more comfortable with using AR, but you're not sure how to go about applying it in your classroom. Every one of these books has at least one AR activity to connect to the different content areas. So we've got Create for Comic Relief, Earth Day, looking at your mental health, oceans, wildlife, Create for Bees, climate change, equality, and wellness, with a new book to come out this month, Create for Kindness. And while there's lots of creative approaches for music, videography, drawing, photography, and coding as well in those books, there are some AR activities as well that you could use as inspiration for having that purposeful connection to AR in the classroom, and using it as a means for students to express their understanding, especially if it relates to these types of topics. So thank you. We've come to the end of our session. I'm going to open it up now to any questions that you might have, and I'll pop all of those links to those resources in the chat.